Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you an impressive and chilling story. Let's meet Seraphine Holloway, a woman who died for 17 minutes and 23 seconds and came back with a shocking revelation about the hidden power of fasting and the future of humanity. What Jesus showed her on the other side challenges everything we know about the spiritual world. So before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready for this intense and transformative journey. My name is Seraphine Holloway, and if you are reading this, know that nothing happens by chance. I was never someone who sought attention. I have always been discreet, preferring the tranquility of books to the hustle and bustle of crowds. For years, I was a literature teacher, fascinated by the power of words, by the stories that shape our worldview. But no story I read, no narrative I taught could compare to what I experienced. I died, not figuratively, not as a metaphor. My heart stopped for exactly 17 minutes and 23 seconds. And in that time, I saw things that challenged everything I believed to be real. When I came back, nothing made sense like it used to. The physical world seemed just a pale shadow of something much larger, more vibrant and intense. The true reality was beyond this plane, and I was allowed to glimpse it. It all started with a fast. At first, it was a subtle call, a constant nuisance that wouldn't leave me alone. I have always been a woman of faith, but faith can be comfortable, lukewarm, a prayer before dinner, a praise on Sundays. What God wanted from me was deeper, more radical. I hesitated. 7 days without food, just water. I didn't know if I could do it. But a voice inside me, insistent and clear, said it was necessary, that there was something waiting for me if I obeyed. And so, on the 7th day of fasting, on a peaceful morning, I left home without imagining that I would ever return in the same way. It was an instant, an intersection, a light rain, headlights coming too quickly, the sound of impact, and then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the car. I saw my body from the outside. I saw the paramedics running, the red light of the sirens reflecting on the wet asphalt. But I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel pain. There was just a strange serenity, as if everything was happening according to a plan far greater than I could understand. And then, the light came, and my journey began. I can't say exactly when it started. It was not a dream, nor a clear vision. It was something that slowly settled inside me, like an uneasiness that wouldn't leave me alone. Fasting. In church, I heard about him. I knew that it was a common practice among the first Christians, that prophets and apostles fasted before receiving great revelations. But to me, it always seemed distant, a sacrifice reserved for spiritual leaders and prayer warriors. I never considered myself one of those people, until everything started to change. It was like a persistent whisper in my soul, a soft but insistent voice telling me I needed to empty myself, prepare. That was the word that echoed inside me whenever I prayed. I didn't know what I was preparing for, but the sense of urgency grew every day. I resisted at first. 7 days with just water? I had never done anything like this before. My friends would laugh if I said that out loud. My brother, Nathan, would certainly call me crazy. But the more I tried to ignore it, the stronger the impression became that something big it was about to happen. So I gave in. On the first day, I felt hungry and had a headache. In the second, the temptations were almost unbearable. I found myself opening the refrigerator several times only to close it again. But at the same time, something different was happening. My mind was more alert, my prayer more intense. There were times when I felt a presence so strong with me that my room seemed too small to contain it. On the 4th day, physical exhaustion gave way to indescribable peace. My prayers became deeper. The voice inside me seemed clearer. I knew I was being guided towards something greater. On the morning of the 7th day, I woke up with my heart racing. There was an anticipation in the air, as if I were about to cross an invisible threshold. Something was about to happen. I left home early for a prayer meeting. The rain was falling lightly over Asheville, and the city was silent, still asleep. He drove slowly, listening to a soft praise on the radio. My spirit was at peace. And then, it happened. Headlights appeared on my left, blinding, too quick to react. The sound of the impact was like thunder. Everything went dark. The beat was brutal. There was no time to think, nor to react. The world spun around me. the sound of twisting metal and shattering glass filling my ears. My body was thrown against the seatbelt, and then, silence. Everything stopped. I expected to feel pain, but there was nothing, just a strange emptiness, a pause in time. Then, an instant later, I was there, outside my own body. What I saw first were the lights, red and blue, reflecting off the wet road. The paramedics were kneeling beside me, working frantically. I saw everything. My body inert on the asphalt, blood running down the asphalt. One rescuer's hands pressed against my chest, while another screamed for a defibrillator. I knew I must have been desperate, but all I felt was a strange ease, as if the reality around me was just a scene in a movie. There was an indescribable lightness, a total absence of weight. Then I saw the driver who hit my car. He was sitting on the sidewalk, hunched over, with his hands over his face. His body trembled, he was crying, and in that moment, something profound happened inside me. I should be angry. I should hate him for destroying my life in a second, but there was no anger, no resentment. What I felt was compassion. He hadn't planned this. He didn't go out that morning with the intention of killing someone. He was just a broken man, stuck in his own mistakes, and God still loved him. A light wind blew around me, and when I looked up, I saw something I will never forget. The sky began to open. It was as if the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. A golden light began to pour over me, bright but not blinding. She didn't just illuminate, she lived. And then, I was pulled up. The earthly world was quickly moving away, and in front of me, a tunnel of light formed. I couldn't resist. I didn't feel scared. I knew where I was going, and the journey was just beginning. I was pulled upwards with indescribable speed, but without feeling any wind or impact. It was as if I was being carried by an invisible, irresistible force that enveloped me completely. I wasn't falling or flying. I was being called. In front of me, the tunnel of light shone, pulsing with an energy that wasn't just light. It was alive. Every particle of that golden clarity seemed to contain something deeper than any light I had ever seen on Earth. There was love in her. When I crossed the entrance to the tunnel, I felt a radiant warmth course through my entire being. But it was not physical heat. It was peace. The most absolute peace I have ever experienced. There was no fear, no doubt. There was no weight on my soul, none of the worries that used to haunt me. I didn't need to question where I was going. I just knew I was coming home. So, I started listening. At first, it was a subtle, almost imperceptible sound, like a distant murmur. But as I went deeper into the tunnel, the sound became clearer. It was a melody, but not like any earthly music. It vibrated inside me. It was like all creation was singing in harmony. An even more intense light appeared in front of me, bigger and brighter than anything I could imagine. But it didn't hurt my eyes, on the contrary. It attracted me. With each passing moment, I felt like I was becoming more real, as if everything I experienced before had been just a shadow of what was true. It was then that I realized that I wasn't alone. There were presences all around me. I couldn't see their shapes clearly, but I could feel them. They were beings made of light, radiating love and welcome. They didn't call me by name, but somehow they knew exactly who I was. One of them came closer and, without saying a word, sent a message straight to my heart. You are being called to see, to understand, to testify. My tears fell, but not from sadness. It was pure emotion. It was the feeling of finally understanding something that my soul had longed for so long. Then, the great light in front of me expanded, and I saw it. I saw what was beyond the tunnel, and in the center of it all, a figure approached. Jesus. The light before me was not just intense. She was a living, pulsating presence, charged with love and power, and in the center of that light, he was there. Jesus. I didn't need words to recognize him. Before I even see him completely, I already knew. The light around him did not emanate. She was part of him. An indescribable glory radiated from his presence. But most of all, it was love. A love so pure, so absolute, that enveloped me in a way that made everything inside me tremble. I was before the one I had always sought, before the one who knew me more than I knew myself. When our eyes met, I felt completely seen. Every flaw, every mistake, every weakness. He knew everything, but instead of judgment, there was love. A love so deep that it seemed to burn inside me. He smiled, I brought you here to show you what your eyes have never seen and your ears have never heard. His voice was not just sound, it was true. It was life. It reverberated within me, filling every space of my being. And then, he extended his hand. When he touched my shoulder, the world around me has changed. I saw the earth from above, as if I were floating above it. But what really caught my attention were the golden threads rising from earth to heaven. Millions of them, some thin and fragile, others thick and shiny. They extended like rays of light, creating invisible connections between the earthly and spiritual worlds. "Do you know what they are?" Jesus asked. I just shook my head. "These are my children's fasts." I looked again and noticed something extraordinary. Every time someone fasted with a sincere heart, the thread of light grew stronger. And then Jesus showed me something else. Below us, I saw a dark cloak enveloping the earth, a kind of dense barrier, like a gloomy mist that obscured the connection between heaven and the world. This is the veil that covers the eyes of many, but at some points, there were openings, small ruptures in the black mantle, where heavenly light flowed through the golden threads. Every time one of my children sincerely fasts, the veil is torn. I was speechless. They think fasting is just a practice, but it is a key, a bridge, a weapon that can destroy darkness. Jesus then showed me pictures from the past. Moses, kneeling at Sinai, fasting for 40 days before receiving the 10 Commandments. Daniel, praying and fasting while facing spiritual principalities. And thousands, millions of others, unknown men and women, who fasted over the centuries without ever knowing the impact they had on the spiritual realm. It was then that I understood. The fast, it was not a sacrifice to convince God to act. It was a form of alignment. Many of my children do not understand the power they have. Jesus' voice sounded sad but firm. "Fasting does not make me love you more. You already have my love completely, but it positions you to receive what I have already prepared for you." He looked back at earth. Time is short. The battles that will come cannot be won with words alone. My children will need to be spiritually prepared, and fasting will be essential. My heart was beating fast. I understood now, but there was still something more he needed to know. Jesus turned to me once again, with eyes so full of love that I felt small before him. "Tell them what you saw." And at that moment, I started to fall. The light around me disappeared. The sky receded, and I felt my spirit being pulled back into my earthly body. The mission had begun. The fall was sudden. In an instant, I was in the presence of Jesus, surrounded by the living light of heaven. In the next moment, I was being pulled backwards, speeding down through the tunnel of light. The feeling was strange. I didn't want to go back. Every part of my being longed to remain in that place of absolute peace, where there was no fear, pain, or doubt. I finally understood things that had previously seemed unattainable. But Jesus' order echoed inside me. "Tell them what you saw." And then, I felt the impact. My body felt heavy, suffocated, like I was trapped in something too small to contain my soul. There was an insistent sound around me. Voices, machine noises, alarms. Then I felt a sharp pain in my chest, as if something was forcing me to breathe again. My eyes opened. I was lying in a hospital bed. Viva. The white ceiling above me seemed to rotate. My vision was blurry and everything seemed absurdly noisy. Voices murmured around. Someone held my wrist. I was back. "She's breathing," a voice exclaimed. I looked to the side and saw a woman in a lab coat, the doctor responsible for reviving me. His face was pale, and his wide eyes showed something between shock and fascination. This doesn't make sense. I saw other doctors and nurses around my bed, their expressions full of disbelief. It was then that I realized they weren't just surprised that I came back. They were shocked because I wasn't supposed to be alive. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. My mind was still torn between the two worlds, trying to understand what had happened. That's when I heard a whisper. She was dead for 17 minutes and 23 seconds. I looked around, trying to process. 17 minutes and 23 seconds. To the doctors, this meant that I must have severe brain damage, if he should even be conscious. But there I was, breathing normally, with no apparent after effects. The silence in the room was tense. Everyone seemed to expect something to go wrong, for my body to fail in some way. But inside me, I already knew the truth. There was no damage whatsoever. Why I didn't come back by chance. I came back because there was a mission to accomplish. The doctor, still in disbelief, leaned towards me. Do you remember anything? I closed my eyes for a moment. I remembered everything. The tunnel of light, the golden threads connecting earth to heaven, the look of Jesus, full of love and urgency. I took a deep breath and looked at her. My voice came out stronger than I expected. Yes, I've been there. The room fell silent, and at that moment, I knew that my life would never be the same. The months that followed my return were a whirlwind. My recovery was considered a medical miracle. No brain damage, no sequels, no scientific explanation. My body, which had been without oxygen for 17 minutes and 23 seconds, was completely intact. But I knew my real challenge. It wasn't physical. From the moment I woke up in the hospital, I carried within me a conviction that I could not ignore. I needed to tell you what I saw, and then the difficulties began. My family wavered between skepticism and fear. My brother, Nathan, was the most resistant. He looked at me with concern every time I talked about what I experienced. Seraphine, you had a trauma. Your brain, it may have created false memories to deal with this. They weren't false memories. My voice was firm, because inside me there was no doubt. I saw. I've been there. He shook his head, frustrated. You can believe what you want, but this, he sighed. Just be careful with people. If you go around telling this story, it will end up becoming a spectacle. But I wasn't afraid. I began sharing my testimony, initially for small groups, church friends, people close to you, but soon the news spread. Some listened in faith, others with disbelief, others, like Nathan, with distrust and fear. And then, happened again. 3 months after the accident, I was alone at home in a time of deep prayer. From my experience of fasting had become an essential part of my life. That night, I was on the 3rd day of a new fast. The weight of Jesus' revelation still pulsed inside me, and I felt like something was about to happen. And then, my heart stopped. There was no pain. There was no fear. Just a sudden transition. One moment I was kneeling on the carpet in my room. The next moment I was out of my body. But this time, there was no tunnel. This time, I was immediately taken back to the spiritual realm. The light enveloped me, and when my eyes opened, Jesus was there, waiting for me. His gaze was full of love, but also urgency. I brought you back to show you the fruit of what you learned. Behind him, the golden threads that I had previously seen in my first experience had multiplied. Look, I looked around and saw light waves spreading across the earth. Small points of light appeared, growing, interconnecting, until they formed something similar to a field of light energy covering the world. My heart accelerated. My testimony was spreading, and that was changing the spiritual world. Jesus' words echoed within me. Every time someone fasts, a new connection is created. Each time someone understands this truth, the veil that covers the earth weakens. I cried, not out of sadness, but out of pure emotion. They are understanding, I whispered. Jesus nodded, but there is still more. Suddenly, I saw people being freed, addictions breaking, families being restored, people who had never felt the presence of God, finally encountering him. What started as a small seed of truth was growing into something much bigger. And then, Jesus looked straight into my eyes. Tell them again. My soul shook. Now speak with the conviction of someone who has seen the fruits. And with those words, I was pulled back. I woke up in the hospital, once again surrounded by confused doctors. This time, I had no vital signs for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. But inside me, I knew what I needed to do. This time, when I returned to my body, there was no doubt whatsoever about what needed to be done. If my first near-death experience showed me the truth about fasting, this second one showed me the real impact of this truth in the spiritual world. The waves of light I saw, the golden threads multiplying, people being freed. It wasn't just about me, it was about everyone. It was a calling collective. The hospital was in an uproar. 2 experiences of clinical death in 3 months. No sequels, no brain damage. Incredulous doctors. That doesn't make sense, he murmured. Dr. Evelyn Carter, the same doctor who revived me the first time. I looked her in the eyes. It doesn't make sense for science, but it makes sense to God. She didn't respond. He just watched me, as if trying to find some rational explanation that didn't exist. In the following days and when I returned home, I knew I needed to act. I could no longer keep this message to small groups. Jesus called me to proclaim, so I started traveling, sharing my testimony. At first, there were just meetings in small churches, but as people listened and experienced the power of fasting, something started to happen. Real transformations, restored marriages, addictions being broken, unexplainable medical miracles, and above all, a spiritual hunger growing in people's hearts. Then, one night, I had a vision. I was in my room, kneeling, when everything around me disappeared. The earth covered in a dense shadow. It was the same dark spiritual cloak that Jesus had shown me in my first experience. But now, he seemed stronger, as if it were thickening, like a storm about to break. Times are short. The voice of Jesus echoed inside me. I looked at the golden threads. There were more of them now, but were not enough. My people need to be spiritually prepared. Anguish filled my chest. What's coming? I asked. Silence was the only answer. But inside me, I already knew. Something was about to happen in the world. Something big, challenging, transformative. And those who were spiritually ready, those who understood the power of fasting and prayer, they would be the light in the midst of darkness. So I heard your final words. Tell them. And at that moment, I knew my mission was just beginning. After that vision, the weight of responsibility fell on me like never before. I knew I couldn't ignore what Jesus had shown me. Time was short. Something was approaching. A change. A battle. An event that would require God's people to be prepared. But how would I tell this to the world? There were still skeptics. There were those who scoffed, who reduced my experience to the delusions of a traumatized mind. My own brother, Nathan, still refused to believe it. That night, I sat with him on the porch of the house where we grew up. The crisp Asheville air smelled of dew-wet trees, and the silence between us was heavy. You still don't believe me, do you? I asked softly. Nathan sighed, running his hands through his hair. I believe you believe that, Seraphine. He looked at me with a mixture of concern and frustration. But, I don't know. What would you do if I told you that hard times were coming? He frowned. I would say there are always difficult times. The world is full of problems. I took a deep breath, not like before. He turned completely towards me, noticing the seriousness in my tone. Are you talking about the end of times? I'm talking about a call to be ready. My heart was beating fast. Nathan, I saw it. The spiritual world is changing. There's something coming. A battle that cannot be won with empty words or superficial faith. People need to understand the power of fasting. They need to be spiritually strong. He was silent for a moment, staring at the floor. You know it sounds crazy, right? I laughed, without humor. I don't care about that anymore. Nathan sighed again, but this time his expression was different. There was doubt, yes, but there was something more. He was listening, and then, in that instant, I knew. I didn't need to convince anyone. I just needed to speak, because deep down, those who were spiritually aware, they would feel the truth. That night, I knelt once again to pray, and as he prayed, a conviction took over my spirit. I needed to prepare people, and it was then that Jesus spoke to me for the last time that night. Tell them I'm calling my church back to biblical fasting. Time is short, and my people need to understand these truths before it is too late. The truth is that I died. By 17 minutes and 23 seconds, my heart stopped, my breathing stopped, and, to the physical world, I no longer existed. But what I experienced at that time was not a void, nor an illusion. It was a calling. I saw what happens in the spiritual world when we fast. We use golden threads connecting earth to heaven. I saw the dark veil that covers humanity and how it can be broken by fasting and prayer. Jesus showed me that this practice, it is not a purposeless sacrifice. It is not a meaningless ritual. It's a weapon, a bridge to the divine, a connection with the greater reality that surrounds us, even if we cannot see it with our earthly eyes. And then, I went back. No sequels, no brain damage, no medical explanation, but with a mission. After my second near-death experience, I realized that my life could never be the same. I had to speak, so I spoke. And what happened next? It was a revival. People began fasting with a new understanding. They began to see real changes, miracles happening, spiritual oppressions being broken. The spiritual world reacted, but the battle is not over yet. The darkness still grows, and many still do not understand the power they possess. Time is short. And so, I say to you, who are reading this story now, the calling is not just for me, it's for you too. If God is calling his people back to fasting, how will you respond? If he's saying hard times are coming, will you be ready? If you felt something inside you as you read these words, if your spirit reacted to this message, don't ignore it. The spiritual world is more real than anything we can touch, and the time to prepare and now. Don't wait. Respond to the call. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.